Welcome to another soothing episode of Boring History, where we explore the mundane details of the past to help you drift off to sleep. Tonight, we'll be delving into the various methods ancient civilizations used to stay cool in hot climates. Our journey will take us from the scorching sands of Egypt to the humid jungles of the Maya, and even to the bustling streets of ancient Rome. As we explore these ancient cooling techniques, you'll find yourself transported to a world without air conditioning or electric fans. Instead, we'll discover how our ancestors used clever architectural designs, natural materials, and simple yet effective methods to beat the heat. So settle in, close your eyes, and let the gentle waves of history wash over you. We'll begin our cool and calming journey in the land of the pharaohs, where the blazing sun once ruled supreme. In the scorching heat of ancient Egypt, where the sun blazed relentlessly and temperatures soared, the people of this ancient civilization had to develop ingenious ways to stay cool. Let's explore how the Egyptians managed to beat the heat in a time long before air conditioning or electric fans. One of the most fundamental aspects of staying cool in ancient Egypt was the architecture. The Egyptians designed their homes with cooling in mind. They built thick mud brick walls that provided excellent insulation, keeping the interiors cool during the day and warm at night. These walls were often whitewashed to reflect the sun's rays, further reducing heat absorption. Houses were typically constructed with high ceilings, allowing hot air to rise and escape through small windows near the top. This created a natural ventilation system, promoting air circulation and cooling. Some wealthy homes even featured roof terraces where people could sleep on hot nights, taking advantage of the cooler air and occasional breezes. Water played a crucial role in ancient Egyptian cooling methods. Many homes had central courtyards with pools or fountains. As water evaporated from these features, it created a cooling effect in the surrounding area. Some affluent Egyptians would have servants fan them with palm fronds dipped in water, providing a refreshing mist. The Nile River, the lifeblood of ancient Egypt, also served as a natural air conditioner. The prevailing north winds would blow across the river, picking up moisture and carrying it over the land, creating a cooling effect. People would often gather near the riverbanks to enjoy this natural breeze. Clothing choices were another important factor in staying cool. The ancient Egyptians favored lightweight, loose-fitting garments made from linen. This breathable fabric allowed air to circulate and sweat to evaporate easily. Light-colored clothing was preferred as it reflected the sun's rays rather than absorbing them. For those who could afford it, wigs were a popular fashion accessory that also served a practical purpose. These wigs, often made from human hair or plant fibers, provided an extra layer of insulation for the head, protecting it from the direct heat of the sun. The ancient Egyptians also adapted their daily routines to cope with the heat. They would often rise early to complete most of their work during the cooler morning hours. During the hottest part of the day, many would retreat indoors for a siesta, emerging again in the late afternoon when temperatures began to drop. Diet played a role in staying cool as well. The Egyptians consumed lots of fruits and vegetables with high water content, such as melons, grapes, and lettuce. These foods helped keep them hydrated and cool from the inside out. They also favored foods that could be eaten cold or at room temperature, avoiding the need for hot meals during sweltering days. Interestingly, the ancient Egyptians had their own version of air conditioning for the pharaohs and nobility. Slaves would chip large blocks of ice brought from the mountains and use them to cool rooms. As the ice melted, the cool water would be collected in troughs, and the evaporation would help to lower the temperature of the surrounding air. Some inventive Egyptians created a primitive form of swamp cooler. They would hang damp reeds in windows or doorways. As the dry air passed through these moistened reeds, it would pick up water through evaporation, cooling as it entered the building. The ancient Egyptians also took advantage of the Earth's natural cooling properties. They would dig underground chambers or even entire rooms below the surface level. These subterranean spaces remained significantly cooler than above-ground areas, providing a refuge from the heat. In some instances, the Egyptians would create wind catchers on their roofs. These were structures designed to funnel cooler air from higher altitudes down into the living spaces below. This method was particularly effective in creating air circulation in otherwise stagnant interiors. For personal cooling, the Egyptians used handheld fans made from ostrich feathers, papyrus, or palm leaves. These fans were not just practical items, but often beautifully decorated, serving as both a cooling device and a fashion accessory. The wealthy sometimes employed more exotic methods of staying cool. There are accounts of servants being tasked with fanning wine jars to keep the contents cool, or even standing in cool water and then walking on the floors to lower the temperature of the room. Public spaces were designed with cooling in mind as well. Many temples and public buildings featured shaded colonnades and courtyards with pools or fountains. These areas provided a cool retreat for people during the hottest parts of the day. The ancient Egyptians also recognized the cooling properties of certain plants. They would grow trees and climbing vines near their homes to provide shade and evaporated cooling. Papyrus plants, which thrive in water, were often planted in and around pools to enhance the cooling effect. In some cases, the Egyptians would dampen the floors of their homes with water. As the water evaporated, it would cool the air above it. This method was particularly effective in conjunction with the high ceilings and small upper windows, as it encouraged air circulation. For those working outdoors, such as farmers and construction workers, wide-brimmed hats made from straw or reeds were common. These hats provided shade for the face and neck, offering some protection from the intense sun. The ancient Egyptians also developed cooling techniques for food storage. They created porous clay pots that, when filled with water, would allow small amounts to seep through and evaporate on the surface. This evaporation process cooled the contents of the pot, helping to keep food fresh for longer periods. In conclusion, the ancient Egyptians displayed remarkable ingenuity in their methods of staying cool in a harsh, hot climate. From architectural innovations to clever use of natural resources, they developed a variety of techniques that allowed them to thrive in conditions that might seem unbearable to us today. Their methods remind us that sometimes the simplest solutions can be the most effective, and that human creativity can overcome even the most challenging environmental obstacles. As we continue our journey through the annals of history, we're about to delve into some truly fascinating, yet soothingly mundane tales from the past. These stories are designed to pique your interest just enough to keep you engaged, but not so much that they'll prevent you from drifting off into a peaceful slumber. In the coming segments, we'll explore various aspects of daily life from different historical periods and cultures. These accounts are carefully crafted to be informative yet calming, providing you with interesting tidbits of knowledge while gently lulling you towards sleep. Our first story will transport us to the sun-baked lands of ancient Egypt, where we'll discover the ingenious methods people used to stay cool in the scorching desert heat. Following that, we'll journey to medieval Europe to learn about the surprisingly complex world of medieval toilets and hygiene practices. Next, we'll uncover the surprisingly intricate history of socks, from their humble beginnings to their evolution into a staple of modern wardrobes. Our fourth tale will take us to ancient China, where we'll explore the fascinating and sometimes bizarre world of imperial court etiquette. As we progress through these stories, you may find your eyelids growing heavier and your mind becoming more relaxed. That's perfectly all right. Feel free to let your consciousness drift in and out as we explore these quiet corners of history together. Remember, there's no pressure to stay awake for the entire narrative. These stories are designed to be soothing and repetitive, allowing you to fall asleep naturally at any point. So make yourself comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's begin our first sleep story about staying cool in ancient Egypt. As we continue our journey through ancient Egypt, we turn our attention to one of the most crucial aspects of Egyptian civilization, the Nile River and its impact on agriculture. This life-giving waterway was not just a geographical feature, but the very foundation of Egyptian society and economy. The Nile, stretching over 6,650 kilometers, is the world's longest river. In ancient times, flowed northward through northeastern Africa, emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. The river's annual flood cycle was of paramount importance to the Egyptians, so much so that they divided their calendar into 3 seasons based on the Nile's behavior. The first season, called Akhet, was the inundation period when the Nile flooded. This typically occurred from June to September. During this time, the river would overflow its banks, depositing rich silt across the floodplain. The second season, Paret, from October to February, was the growing season when crops were planted in the newly fertilized soil. Finally, Shemu, from March to May, was the harvest season when crops were gathered before the next flood cycle began. This predictable cycle allowed the ancient Egyptians to develop a sophisticated and highly productive agricultural system. The fertile soil deposited by the annual floods, combined with the hot, dry climate and abundant sunshine, created ideal conditions for growing a variety of crops. The most important crop in ancient Egypt was grain, particularly emmer wheat and barley. These grains formed the basis of the Egyptian diet and were used to make bread and beer, two staples of their daily life. Other crops included flax, used for making linen, as well as various fruits and vegetables such as onions, leeks, lentils, figs, dates, and grapes. To make the most of the Nile's waters, the Egyptians developed an intricate system of irrigation. They dug canals to direct water from the Nile to fields further from the river's banks. They also constructed basins that would trap floodwater, allowing it to soak into the soil and deposit its precious silt before being drained for planting. One of the most ingenious irrigation tools developed by the ancient Egyptians was the shadow. This simple yet effective device consisted of a long pole balanced on a crossbeam, with a heavy counterweight on one end and a bucket suspended from the other. This allowed farmers to easily lift water from the Nile or canals and pour it into irrigation ditches. The importance of the Nile to Egyptian agriculture cannot be overstated. The Greek historian Herodotus famously referred to Egypt as the gift of the Nile, and this was no exaggeration. The river's annual flood was so reliable that it formed the basis of Egypt's prosperity for thousands of years. However, the Nile's flood was not always predictable. Too little water could lead to drought and famine, while too much could destroy crops and buildings. The Egyptians developed a system of nilometers, structures built along the river to measure the water level during the annual flood. These measurements were used to predict the harvest and calculate taxes. The agricultural surplus produced by this efficient system allowed for the development of a complex society with specialized labor. Farmers could produce enough food to support other members of society who were not directly involved in food production, such as craftsmen, scribes, and priests. This surplus also allowed for the construction of monumental architecture, including the pyramids. The labor for these massive projects was often provided by farmers during the flood season when they couldn't work in the fields. The Nile's influence extended beyond agriculture. It served as a vital transportation route, facilitating trade and communication throughout the kingdom. Boats made of papyrus reeds or wood traveled up and down the river, carrying goods, people, and ideas. The river also played a significant role in Egyptian religion and mythology. The Nile god Hapi was believed to be responsible for the annual flood, and many other deities were associated with the river and its cycles. The east bank of the Nile was associated with life and rebirth, while the west bank was associated with death and the afterlife, influencing the placement of tombs and temples. Despite the Nile's central role in Egyptian life, the ancient Egyptians faced numerous challenges in managing their agricultural system. Soil salinization, caused by the evaporation of irrigation water, was a persistent problem. They combated this by periodically leaving fields fallow and by cultivating salt-tolerant crops. Another challenge was the need to maintain and repair irrigation systems. This required coordinated effort and centralized planning, contributing to the development of Egypt's complex bureaucratic state. The ancient Egyptians also developed sophisticated techniques for land surveying and record-keeping. After each flood, boundaries had to be re-established as the inundation often erased field markers. Scribes kept meticulous records of land ownership, crop yields, and taxes. As we reflect on the agricultural practices of ancient Egypt, it's worth noting how many of these innovations continue to influence modern farming. The concept of irrigation, crop rotation, and the use of natural fertilizers are all agricultural techniques that have their roots in ancient civilizations like Egypt. In conclusion, the Nile River and its impact on Egyptian agriculture were fundamental to the development and longevity of ancient Egyptian civilization. The river's annual flood cycle, combined with the ingenuity of the Egyptian people, created an agricultural system that supported one of the ancient world's most impressive and enduring cultures. From the grand monuments that still stand today to the agricultural techniques that continue to influence modern farming, the legacy of the Nile and Egyptian agriculture continues to flow through history, much like the great river itself. As we continue our journey through ancient Egyptian cooling methods, let's turn our attention to the clothing and fashion choices of the time. The garments worn by the ancient Egyptians were not only a reflection of their social status and cultural norms, but also served a practical purpose in helping them stay cool in the scorching desert heat. The primary material used for clothing in ancient Egypt was linen. This lightweight, breathable fabric was derived from the flax plant, which grew abundantly along the Nile River. The process of creating linen was labor-intensive, involving harvesting the flax, soaking it in water, beating it to separate the fibers, and then spinning and weaving the threads into cloth. Linen's popularity in ancient Egyptian fashion was not merely a matter of aesthetics. Its properties made it ideal for the hot climate. Linen is highly absorbent, capable of wicking moisture away from the skin, which helped to keep the wearer cool and dry. Additionally, the loose weave of linen allowed air to circulate freely, providing a natural cooling effect. The most common garment for both men and women was the simple linen sheath dress, known as a calasiris. This basic piece of clothing was essentially a long, loose-fitting tube of fabric that extended from just below the chest to the ankles. Women's calasiris often featured shoulder straps, while men's versions were typically sleeveless. For men, another popular option was the shenty, a kind of kilt or skirt that wrapped around the waist and extended to just above the knee. This garment allowed for greater freedom of movement, which was particularly useful for laborers and craftsmen. Higher-ranking officials and pharaohs would often wear longer, more elaborate versions of the shenty, sometimes paired with a sheer, loose-fitting shirt. Women's fashion in ancient Egypt also included the option of wearing a sheer, pleated dress over the basic calasiris. This additional layer, while seemingly counterintuitive in a hot climate, actually helped to trap a layer of cool air close to the skin, providing an extra measure of comfort. It's worth noting that the ancient Egyptians often preferred to wear as little clothing as possible, especially in the privacy of their homes. Children, in particular, often went naked until they reached puberty. This practice was not only a response to the heat, but also reflected the Egyptians' relatively open attitudes towards the human body. Footwear was another important aspect of ancient Egyptian fashion that served both practical and cooling purposes. The most common type of shoe was the sandal, typically made from papyrus or palm leaves. These simple, open shoes allowed the feet to breathe and stay cool. Many Egyptians, however, preferred to go barefoot, especially indoors or on smooth surfaces. Accessories also played a role in ancient Egyptian cooling strategies. Wide collars, often made of gold or beads, were popular among the upper classes. These collars, while decorative, also served to reflect the sun's heat away from the neck and chest. Similarly, crowns and headdresses, particularly those worn by pharaohs and other nobility, often incorporated materials and designs that helped shield the head from direct sunlight. Interestingly, the ancient Egyptians also used certain cosmetics and body treatments to help combat the heat. For example, they would often apply scented oils to their skin. As the oils evaporated, they would create a cooling effect. Additionally, these oils helped to moisturize the skin, preventing dryness and cracking in the arid climate. One particularly intriguing cooling method involved the use of wigs. While we might think of wigs as adding unnecessary warmth, the ancient Egyptians found them useful for staying cool. Made from human hair or plant fibers, these wigs could be soaked in scented oils. As the oils slowly evaporated throughout the day, they would provide a constant cooling effect to the scalp and head. The color of clothing also played a role in heat management. While we often associate ancient Egyptian clothing with white linen, colored fabrics were not uncommon, especially among the wealthy. However, lighter colors were generally preferred for their ability to reflect sunlight and heat. Dark colors, which absorb more heat, were less common in everyday wear. It's important to note that clothing choices in ancient Egypt were not solely determined by the need to stay cool. Social status, religious beliefs, and cultural norms all played significant roles in fashion decisions. For example, priests were required to wear only linen garments and leather sandals, as other animal-based materials were considered impure. The ancient Egyptians also had specific clothing customs for different occasions. For instance, during religious festivals or important ceremonies, people would often wear their finest garments, regardless of the heat. These special outfits might include more layers, intricate beadwork, or heavier jewelry, prioritizing tradition and display over comfort. Despite these occasional departures from purely practical clothing choices, the overall trend in ancient Egyptian fashion remained focused on staying cool. The loose, flowing garments, breathable fabrics, and minimal coverage all contributed to a style that was well suited to the hot, dry climate of the Nile Valley. As we reflect on the clothing and fashion choices of ancient Egypt, we can see how deeply intertwined they were with the environmental challenges faced by this civilization. The ingenuity displayed in their garment design and material choices demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of heat management that continues to influence hot weather fashion to this day. In our next segment, we'll explore how the ancient Egyptians incorporated architectural design into their cooling strategies, creating homes and buildings that provided respite from the relentless desert heat. But for now, let the gentle rustle of linen garments and the soft padding of sandaled feet across cool stone floors lull you into a peaceful state of relaxation. As we delve deeper into the methods ancient Egyptians used to stay cool, we must consider the crucial role that housing played in their efforts to combat the scorching heat. The architecture and design of ancient Egyptian homes were carefully crafted to provide relief from the intense desert climate. One of the most notable features of ancient Egyptian housing was the use of thick mud brick walls. These walls, often several feet thick, served as excellent insulators against the heat. The dense material absorbed the sun's rays during the day and slowly released the heat at night, helping to maintain a more stable internal temperature. The ancient Egyptians also employed clever design techniques in the layout of their homes. Many houses were built around central courtyards, which allowed for better air circulation and created shaded areas throughout the day. These courtyards often featured small gardens or pools, which not only provided a pleasant aesthetic, but also helped to cool the surrounding air through evaporation. Windows were typically small and placed high on the walls to minimize direct sunlight while still allowing for ventilation. Some homes even featured roof openings that functioned as primitive wind catchers, directing cooler air from higher altitudes down into the living spaces below. The ancient Egyptians also made use of light-colored materials for their roofs and exterior walls. This simple yet effective strategy helped to reflect the sun's rays, reducing the amount of heat absorbed by the structure. In some cases, they would even whitewash their walls to enhance this reflective property. Inside the homes, the ancient Egyptians utilized various techniques to keep cool. One common practice was to hang damp reed mats or cloths in doorways and windows. As the air passed through these moistened barriers, it would be cooled through evaporation, providing a refreshing breeze to the inhabitants. The layout of ancient Egyptian homes was also designed with temperature control in mind. Living areas and bedrooms were often located on the ground floor, where temperatures remained cooler due to the Earth's natural insulation. The upper floors were typically reserved for storage or used as sleeping areas during the cooler months. In more affluent households, servants would be tasked with constantly wetting the floors with water. This practice not only helped to keep dust at bay, but also cooled the air as the water evaporated. Some wealthy Egyptians even had dedicated cooling rooms, where water was continuously poured over sloped floors, creating a cooling effect as it flowed and evaporated. The ancient Egyptians also made use of natural materials in their interior design to help combat the heat. Reed mats and light linen curtains were commonly used as room dividers and window coverings. These materials allowed for airflow while providing shade and privacy. Furniture design also played a role in keeping cool. Beds and chairs were often made with woven reed or palm frond seats, which allowed for better air circulation compared to solid surfaces. Some beds even featured built-in headrests made of cool stone, providing a comfortable place to rest one's head during hot nights. In larger homes and palaces, elaborate water features were sometimes incorporated into the design. These could range from small fountains to larger pools, which not only served as a source of refreshment, but also helped to cool the surrounding air through evaporation. The ancient Egyptians were also mindful of the orientation of their homes. When possible, buildings were constructed to take advantage of prevailing winds, with main entrances facing north to capture cooler breezes. This thoughtful positioning helped to maximize natural ventilation throughout the structure. In some cases, underground rooms or cellars were built to provide a cool retreat during the hottest parts of the day. These subterranean spaces maintained a consistently lower temperature due to their depth and the surrounding Earth's insulation properties. The use of plants and vegetation around homes was another strategy employed by the ancient Egyptians. Trees and climbing vines were planted strategically to provide shade and reduce the amount of direct sunlight hitting the walls and windows of the house. This natural shading helped to keep the interior temperatures more manageable. In urban areas where space was often limited, the ancient Egyptians made use of shared walls between neighboring houses. This practice not only conserved building materials, but also helped to reduce heat gain, as fewer exterior walls were exposed to direct sunlight. The roofs of ancient Egyptian homes were also designed with cooling in mind. Flat roofs were common, and they were often used as living spaces during cooler evenings. Some roofs featured low walls or screens that provided privacy while still allowing for air circulation. In more elaborate dwellings, rooftop gardens were sometimes cultivated. These green spaces not only provided a pleasant area for relaxation, but also helped to insulate the rooms below and reduce the overall temperature of the building. The ancient Egyptians also developed innovative cooling systems for their homes. One such system involved the use of porous water jugs placed in windows. As the wind blew through the porous material, it would cool the water inside, which in turn cooled the air entering the home. Another interesting cooling technique involved the use of charcoal and calcium oxide. When mixed with water, these substances produced an endothermic reaction, absorbing heat from the surrounding air. Wealthy Egyptians would sometimes place containers of this mixture in their rooms to create a cooling effect. The ancient Egyptians' approach to housing design demonstrates their ingenuity and deep understanding of their environment. By combining various architectural elements, natural materials, and clever cooling techniques, they were able to create living spaces that provided respite from the intense heat of their climate. As we reflect on these ancient methods of staying cool, we can appreciate the resourcefulness and creativity of the Egyptian people. Their solutions, while simple by today's standards, were remarkably effective and continue to inspire modern sustainable architecture and design principles. As we continue our journey through ancient Egypt, let's turn our attention to the dietary habits and culinary practices of this fascinating civilization. The Egyptian diet was as diverse as it was practical, shaped by the fertile Nile Valley and the harsh desert climate. The staple foods of ancient Egypt were bread and beer. These two items formed the foundation of their diet and were consumed by people from all social classes. Bread was made from emmer wheat, a hardy grain well suited to the Egyptian climate. The process of making bread was labor-intensive, involving grinding the grain into flour, mixing it with water, and then baking it in clay ovens. Beer, on the other hand, was not only a popular beverage, but also a source of nutrition. It was made from partially baked barley bread, which was then crumbled and mixed with water. The mixture was left to ferment, resulting in a thick, nutritious drink that was lower in alcohol content than modern beers. Both children and adults consumed beer, as it was considered safer to drink than water from the Nile. Fruits played a significant role in the Egyptian diet. Dates were particularly popular and were often used as a sweetener in various dishes. Figs, grapes, and pomegranates were also widely consumed. These fruits were not only eaten fresh, but also dried for preservation, allowing them to be enjoyed throughout the year. Vegetables were another important component of the ancient Egyptian diet. Onions and garlic were especially popular and were believed to have medicinal properties. Lentils, peas, and beans provided essential proteins, while leafy greens such as lettuce and celery added variety to their meals. Fish from the Nile River was a common source of protein for many Egyptians, especially those living near the river. Catfish and tilapia were among the most frequently consumed species. Fish was often dried and salted for preservation, allowing it to be stored for long periods and transported to areas farther from the Nile. Meat, while consumed less frequently than fish, was still an important part of the Egyptian diet, particularly for the upper classes. Cattle, sheep, and goats were raised for their meat, milk, and other products. Poultry, including ducks, geese, and pigeons, was also popular. Wild game, such as gazelles and antelopes, was hunted and consumed by those who could afford such luxuries. The ancient Egyptians were also skilled in food preservation techniques. In addition to drying fruits and salting fish, they developed methods for preserving meat through a combination of salting and drying. This allowed them to store food for longer periods, which was crucial during times of scarcity or for long journeys. Cooking methods in ancient Egypt were diverse and ingenious. Many foods were simply eaten raw or dried, but cooking was also common. Boiling was a frequent method, used for both vegetables and meats. Grilling and roasting were popular for meats, often done over open fires. Baking was primarily used for bread, but also for some meat dishes. The ancient Egyptians also had a variety of cooking utensils and vessels. Clay pots were used for boiling and stewing, while flat clay ovens were used for baking bread. Metal tools, such as knives and spoons, were used by those who could afford them, while wooden utensils were more common among the lower classes. Spices and herbs played a crucial role in Egyptian cuisine, adding flavor and variety to their dishes. Common spices included cumin, coriander, and dill. Herbs such as parsley and mint were also widely used. These not only enhanced the taste of food, but were also believed to have medicinal properties. The concept of a balanced diet was not foreign to the ancient Egyptians. Their meals typically consisted of a grain-based dish, complemented by vegetables and, when available, meat or fish. This combination provided a good balance of carbohydrates, proteins, and other nutrients. Social status greatly influenced dietary habits in ancient Egypt. The upper classes enjoyed a more varied diet, with greater access to meat, exotic fruits, and imported delicacies. They also had the luxury of using finer cooking utensils and dining ware. The lower classes, while having a more limited diet, still managed to maintain a relatively balanced nutritional intake through their staple foods. Feasts and banquets were an important part of Egyptian social life, particularly for the elite. These events showcased the wealth and status of the host and often featured a wide array of dishes. Roasted meats, various fruits, and sweet treats were common at these gatherings. Wine, which was more expensive and less common than beer, was often served at these events. The ancient Egyptians also had their own version of fast food. Street vendors in cities and towns would sell ready-to-eat foods such as bread, fish, and vegetables to workers and travelers. This practice was particularly common near construction sites and in marketplace areas. Religious beliefs also influenced Egyptian dietary practices. Certain foods were considered sacred and were often used in offerings to the gods. For example, onions were associated with eternity due to their layer structure and were frequently included in religious ceremonies. Some animals, such as cows, were considered sacred, and their consumption was restricted or prohibited in certain regions or during specific time periods. The agricultural cycle of the Nile greatly influenced the Egyptian diet. The annual flooding of the Nile, known as the inundation, determined the agricultural calendar. During the flood season, when farming was impossible, stored and preserved foods became crucial. This cyclical nature of food availability led to the development of sophisticated food storage and preservation techniques. Interestingly, the ancient Egyptians also had their own form of nutritional supplements. Certain foods were believed to have specific health benefits. For instance, garlic was thought to increase strength and productivity, while radishes were believed to aid digestion. These beliefs often had a basis in the actual nutritional properties of these foods, showing an early understanding of the connection between diet and health. As we conclude this segment on Egyptian diet and cuisine, it's clear that food played a central role in the daily lives of ancient Egyptians. From the humble bread and beer that sustained the masses to the lavish feasts of the nobility, food was not just about sustenance, but also about culture, social status, and religious beliefs. The ingenuity of the ancient Egyptians in developing diverse cooking methods, preservation techniques, and a balanced diet continues to inspire and inform our understanding of nutrition and culinary practices today. As we delve deeper into the intricacies of ancient Egyptian society, let's turn our attention to the daily lives of the craftsmen who played a crucial role in shaping the civilization's material culture. These skilled workers were the backbone of Egypt's artistic and practical achievements, creating everything from simple pottery to elaborate tomb decorations. In the shadow of grand monuments and royal palaces, Egyptian craftsmen lived and worked in specialized communities. One of the most famous of these was Deir el-Medina, a village that housed the artisans responsible for constructing and decorating the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. This unique settlement provides us with a wealth of information about the lives of ordinary skilled workers in ancient Egypt. The day for an Egyptian craftsman typically began at dawn. As the first rays of the sun touched the banks of the Nile, workers would rise from their simple reed mats or wooden beds. Their homes were modest, often consisting of just a few rooms built from mud bricks. These dwellings were designed to keep out the intense heat, with small windows and thick walls providing insulation against the scorching desert temperatures. Before heading to work, craftsmen would break their fast with a simple meal. This might consist of bread, the staple food of ancient Egypt, perhaps accompanied by some dried fish, onions, or garlic. On special occasions, they might enjoy beer, which was not only a popular beverage, but also a source of nutrition. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the craftsmen would make their way to their workshops. These could be located within temple complexes, near construction sites, or in designated areas within their communities. The nature of their work varied greatly depending on their specific trade. Stonemasons, for instance, would spend their days quarrying, cutting, and shaping blocks of limestone or granite for use in construction projects. Their tools were simple but effective: copper chisels, wooden mallets, and bronze saws. The work was physically demanding, requiring strength, precision, and patience as they slowly transformed rough stone into smooth, uniform blocks. Carpenters, on the other hand, worked with wood imported from Lebanon or harvested from native Egyptian trees like acacia and sycamore. They crafted everything from simple furniture for ordinary homes to elaborate pieces for temples and tombs. Using adzes, saws, and chisels, they would shape planks and beams, joining them with wooden pegs or leather bindings. Potters were essential craftsmen in ancient Egyptian society. They worked with the abundant clay from the Nile, shaping it on wheels or by hand to create vessels for storage, cooking, and religious rituals. After forming the pots, they would decorate them with painted designs or incised patterns before firing them in kilns. Perhaps the most celebrated of all Egyptian craftsmen were the sculptors and painters. These artists were responsible for creating the iconic statues, reliefs, and wall paintings that have come to define ancient Egyptian art. They worked in workshops attached to temples or tombs, often laboring for years on a single project. Sculptors would begin with a block of stone, carefully carving away excess material to reveal the figure within. They used a variety of tools, including copper chisels and diorite pounders, to shape the hard stone. The work was slow and meticulous, with artists following strict conventions of proportion and style that had been established over centuries. Painters, working alongside sculptors, would add vibrant colors to reliefs and create elaborate scenes on the walls of tombs and temples. They used pigments derived from natural materials: ochre for red and yellow, malachite for green, and lapis lazuli for blue. These colors were mixed with gum arabic to create paint that has remarkably endured for thousands of years. The work of these craftsmen was not just a job, but often a hereditary profession passed down through generations. Sons would learn their father's trades, starting as apprentices and gradually developing the skills needed to become master craftsmen themselves. This system ensured the continuity of techniques and styles that are so characteristic of ancient Egyptian art. Despite their crucial role in society, most craftsmen lived modest lives. They were paid in kind, receiving rations of grain, oil, and other necessities. At Deir el-Medina, records show that workers received about 4.5 liters of grain per day, enough to feed a small family. Extra rations or luxury items might be given as bonuses for exceptional work. The life of a craftsman was not without its challenges. Work could be irregular, depending on the needs of the state or wealthy patrons. During the annual Nile flood, when many construction projects were put on hold, craftsmen might find themselves temporarily unemployed. Some would use this time to work on personal projects or take on private commissions. Despite these uncertainties, many craftsmen took great pride in their work. They often left their marks on their creations, sometimes in hidden places where only they would know. These signatures, known as craftsmen's marks, have helped modern archaeologists understand the organization of work in ancient Egypt. As the day drew to a close, craftsmen would return to their homes, often carrying tools or unfinished work with them. Evenings were spent with family, perhaps enjoying a meal together or participating in community activities. Many craftsmen were literate, a skill that set them apart from the majority of the population, and they might spend some time reading or writing. Religion played a significant role in the lives of Egyptian craftsmen. They had their own patron deities, such as Ptah, the god of craftsmen and architects. Regular festivals and rituals provided breaks from the routine of daily work and opportunities for spiritual reflection. The legacy of these ancient craftsmen lives on in the magnificent artifacts and monuments that have survived to this day. From the intricate jewelry found in royal tombs to the colossal statues that still stand guard over ancient temples, their work continues to inspire awe and admiration. The skills and techniques they developed over millennia laid the foundation for many of the crafts we still practice today. As we reflect on the daily lives of these ancient artisans, we gain a deeper appreciation for the human effort behind the grand achievements of ancient Egypt. Their stories remind us that behind every great civilization are countless individuals, each contributing their skills and labor to create something lasting and beautiful. As we delve deeper into the fascinating world of ancient Egypt, let's explore their approach to medicine. The Egyptians were pioneers in many fields, and their medical practices were no exception. Their understanding of the human body and various treatments laid the groundwork for future medical advancements. Ancient Egyptian medicine was a blend of practical techniques and spiritual beliefs. The Egyptians believed that illness was caused by both natural and supernatural forces. This dual approach to health meant that treatments often combined physical remedies with magical spells and incantations. One of the most important figures in Egyptian medicine was Imhotep, who lived around 2650 BCE. He was a high priest, architect, and physician who was later deified as the god of medicine. Imhotep's influence on Egyptian medical practices was so significant that he is often considered the world's first doctor. The Egyptians had a surprisingly advanced understanding of anatomy, thanks in part to their mummification practices. Through this process, they gained intimate knowledge of the human body's internal structures. This knowledge was recorded in medical papyri, which served as textbooks for Egyptian physicians. One of the most famous of these papyri is the Edwin Smith Papyrus, dating back to around 1600 BCE. This document is notable for its rational and scientific approach to medicine, describing 48 cases of injuries, fractures, wounds, and tumors. Each case is presented in a logical manner, including examination, diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis. Another important medical text was the Ebers Papyrus, written around 1550 BCE. This extensive document covers a wide range of medical topics, including digestive diseases, eye problems, skin infections, and even contraceptive methods. It also includes over 700 magical formulas and remedies for various ailments. Egyptian physicians were highly specialized, with different doctors focusing on specific parts of the body. There were dentists, ophthalmologists, eye doctors, gastroenterologists, digestive system specialists, and many others. This level of specialization was quite advanced for its time and demonstrates the complexity of Egyptian medical practice. The Egyptians used a variety of treatments in their medical practice. Herbal remedies were particularly common, with many plants being used for their medicinal properties. For example, garlic was used to treat heart problems and headaches, while aloe vera was applied to skin conditions and burns. Surgical procedures were also performed in ancient Egypt, although they were generally limited to treating wounds, fractures, and abscesses. Egyptian surgeons used a variety of tools, including copper needles, forceps, scalpels, and cauterization devices. They were skilled at setting broken bones and even performed amputations when necessary. One area where the Egyptians excelled was in the treatment of eye diseases. Given the harsh desert environment and prevalent sandstorms, eye problems were common. Egyptian eye doctors developed various ointments and drops to treat conditions like conjunctivitis and trachoma. They even performed cataract surgery, albeit in a rudimentary form. The concept of preventive medicine was also important in ancient Egypt. They understood the value of cleanliness and hygiene in maintaining health. Regular bathing, the use of perfumes and oils, and the practice of circumcision were all part of their approach to preventing illness. Interestingly, the Egyptians also recognized the importance of mental health. They believed that the heart was the center of emotion and intellect, and treatments for mental disorders often involved addressing issues of the heart. This holistic approach to health, considering both physical and mental well-being, was quite progressive for its time. Despite their many advancements, Egyptian medicine was not without its share of superstition and magical thinking. Amulets and charms were often used alongside more practical treatments, and many ailments were attributed to the wrath of gods or the influence of evil spirits. One particularly intriguing aspect of Egyptian medicine was their use of animal products and treatments. For instance, crocodile dung was used as a contraceptive, while cat hair was believed to help heal wounds. While these remedies may seem strange to us now, they reflect the Egyptians' attempts to use all available resources in their pursuit of healing. The Egyptians also made significant contributions to pharmacology. They developed a wide range of medicines, including pills, suppositories, ointments, and even inhalers. Many of their medicinal formulas were quite complex, combining multiple ingredients to create potent remedies. One area where Egyptian medicine fell short was in their understanding of the circulatory system. They believed that the heart was the center of a system of vessels that carried various fluids throughout the body, including blood, tears, urine, and semen. This misconception persisted for centuries and was only corrected much later in medical history. Despite this, the overall impact of Egyptian medicine on the development of medical science cannot be overstated. Many of their practices and discoveries laid the foundation for future advancements in healthcare. The influence of Egyptian medicine can be seen in Greek, Roman, and even medieval European medical traditions. As we reflect on the medical practices of ancient Egypt, we can appreciate both their ingenuity and the limitations of their time. Their blend of practical knowledge, careful observation, and spiritual beliefs created a unique approach to healing that continues to fascinate us today. From the banks of the Nile to modern hospitals, the legacy of Egyptian medicine lives on, reminding us of humanity's enduring quest to understand and heal the human body. In ancient Egypt, personal hygiene and cleanliness were not just matters of health, but also held significant religious and social importance. The hot climate of Egypt made regular bathing a necessity, and the Egyptians developed various methods to keep themselves clean and fresh. Let's begin by exploring the bathing practices of ancient Egyptians. Unlike the elaborate public bathhouses of later civilizations like Rome, most Egyptians bathed in their own homes. The wealthy had dedicated bathrooms with limestone floors sloped for drainage, while the less affluent used portable tubs or basins. Water for bathing was typically drawn from the Nile River or from wells. In some cases, servants would carry water to the bathing areas in large pottery jars. The Egyptians recognized the importance of clean water and often used settling tanks to remove impurities before use. For cleansing, the ancient Egyptians used a type of soap made from animal and vegetable oils mixed with alkaline salts. This soap-like substance was called swabu and was used not only for bathing but also for washing clothes. In addition to soap, they used natron, a naturally occurring mixture of sodium compounds, which acted as a cleanser and mild antiseptic. The Egyptians also developed various oils and creams for moisturizing their skin after bathing. These were often scented with fragrances like myrrh, cinnamon, and lotus. The use of these oils served multiple purposes. They helped protect the skin from the harsh sun and dry climate, acted as a form of perfume, and were believed to have medicinal properties. Interestingly, the ancient Egyptians placed great emphasis on hair removal as part of their hygiene routine. Both men and women would remove most of their body hair, including that on their heads. This practice was particularly important for priests, who were expected to remove all body hair every other day as part of their purification rituals. For hair removal, they used a variety of methods. Bronze razors have been found in archaeological sites, suggesting their use for shaving. They also employed a technique similar to modern waxing, using a sticky paste made from sugar or beeswax mixed with oil and other ingredients. This paste would be applied to the skin and then quickly pulled off, removing hair from the root. Oral hygiene was not neglected either. The ancient Egyptians were among the first civilizations to produce a tooth cleaning paste. This early form of toothpaste was made from powdered ashes of ox hooves, myrrh, eggshell fragments, and pumice. They would rub this mixture on their teeth using their fingers or chew on twigs with frayed ends to clean between their teeth, an early predecessor to the modern toothbrush. The importance of dental care is evident from the medical texts that have survived from ancient Egypt. These texts describe various dental problems and their treatments, indicating a sophisticated understanding of oral health for the time. Moving on to clothing hygiene, the Egyptians took great care in keeping their garments clean. Most clothing was made from linen, which was well suited to the hot climate due to its lightweight and breathable nature. Linen clothing was regularly washed in the Nile or in wash tubs using the aforementioned swabu soap. After washing, clothes would be beaten to remove excess water and then laid out to dry in the sun. The intense Egyptian sun acted as a natural bleaching agent, helping to keep white linen garments bright. Some evidence suggests that the Egyptians may have also used a blue dye derived from the indigo plant to enhance the whiteness of their linen, much like modern bluing agents used in laundry. The ancient Egyptians also developed early forms of deodorants and perfumes to combat body odor in the hot climate. They would apply scented oils and creams to their bodies, with different fragrances often denoting social status. Popular scents included lotus, cinnamon, myrrh, and frankincense. For the wealthy, these fragrances were often applied in the form of scented cones worn on top of the head. These cones, made of animal fat infused with aromatic substances, would slowly melt in the heat, releasing their fragrance and helping to keep the wearer cool and pleasantly scented throughout the day. It's worth noting that the emphasis on cleanliness and hygiene in ancient Egypt was not solely for personal comfort or social reasons. Cleanliness held significant religious importance as well. Many religious rituals required participants to be in a state of purity, which often involved bathing and other cleansing practices. Priests in particular were held to high standards of cleanliness. They were required to bathe several times a day, remove all body hair, and wear only clean linen garments when performing their duties in the temples. This connection between cleanliness and spirituality underscores the central role that hygiene played in Egyptian culture. The ancient Egyptians' advanced hygiene practices had significant positive impacts on public health. Their emphasis on cleanliness, combined with a diet rich in vegetables and fruits, likely contributed to better overall health compared to many other ancient civilizations. However, it's important to note that these high standards of hygiene were not universally accessible. The elite and the priesthood had the means and the obligation to maintain the most rigorous hygiene practices, while the lower classes, particularly agricultural workers and slaves, likely had more limited access to such luxuries. Nevertheless, the general populace still maintained a level of cleanliness that was impressive for the time. The Nile River played a crucial role in this, providing a constant source of water for bathing and washing clothes. The river's annual flood also helped to clean the land and replenish the soil, indirectly contributing to public health. As we conclude this segment on Egyptian bathing and hygiene, it's clear that the ancient Egyptians had a sophisticated understanding of the importance of cleanliness. Their practices, ranging from regular bathing and hair removal to dental care and the use of fragrances, demonstrate a holistic approach to personal hygiene that was quite advanced for their time. These practices not only helped them cope with the challenges of their hot, dry climate, but also played significant roles in their social, religious, and medical traditions. The legacy of ancient Egyptian hygiene practices can still be seen in many modern grooming and cleanliness routines, testament to their enduring influence on human civilization. The Nile River was not just a source of water for ancient Egyptians, it was the very lifeblood of their civilization. Let's explore how life along the Nile shaped the daily experiences of those who called its banks home. The annual flooding of the Nile, known as the inundation, was a critical event in the Egyptian calendar. This natural phenomenon occurred between June and September, depositing rich silt across the floodplains. This nutrient-rich soil was essential for agriculture, allowing Egyptians to grow crops in an otherwise arid landscape. Farmers took advantage of this fertile soil to cultivate a variety of crops. Wheat and barley were staple grains used to make bread and beer. They also grew vegetables such as onions, leeks, and garlic, as well as fruits like dates, figs, and grapes. The abundance of these crops not only fed the population, but also formed the basis of Egypt's economy. To maximize the benefits of the Nile's flooding, ancient Egyptians developed sophisticated irrigation systems. They dug canals to direct water from the river to their fields and created basins to store water for use during the dry season. This ingenuity allowed them to extend their cultivated land beyond the immediate vicinity of the Nile. The river also served as a vital transportation route. Boats made of papyrus reeds or wood were used to transport goods, people, and even massive stone blocks for construction projects. These vessels ranged from small fishing boats to large cargo ships, facilitating trade both within Egypt and with neighboring regions. Fishing was another important aspect of life along the Nile. The river teemed with various species of fish, providing a crucial source of protein for the Egyptian diet. Fishermen used nets, traps, and spears to catch fish, which were then dried or salted for preservation. The Nile's banks were home to a diverse array of wildlife. Hippopotamuses and crocodiles were common sights, both revered and feared by the ancient Egyptians. These animals were often associated with deities in Egyptian mythology, reflecting their significance in daily life. Birds such as ibises, herons, and ducks were abundant along the river, providing both food and inspiration for Egyptian art and hieroglyphs. The papyrus plants that grew in the shallows were not only used to make boats, but also served as a writing material, contributing to the development of Egyptian literature and record keeping. The Nile played a crucial role in religious and spiritual life as well. Many Egyptian deities were associated with the river, such as Hapi, the god of the annual flood, and Khnum, the ram-headed god believed to control the river's flow. Temples were often built near the Nile, and religious ceremonies frequently incorporated the river's waters. The east bank of the Nile was generally associated with life and the rising sun. This is where most ancient Egyptian cities and temples were built. In contrast, the west bank, where the sun set, was associated with death and the afterlife. This is why many tombs and funerary temples were constructed on the western side of the river. Daily life for most Egyptians revolved around the Nile's rhythms. Farmers worked in the fields during the growing season, while craftsmen and artisans produced goods in workshops near the river. Women often gathered water from the Nile for household use, washed clothes in its waters, and tended to small gardens near their homes. The river also provided clay for pottery and mud bricks, the primary building material for most Egyptian homes. These mud brick houses were well suited to the hot climate, keeping interiors cool during the day and warm at night. Social gatherings and festivals often took place along the Nile's banks. people would come together to celebrate religious events, the start of the flood season, or successful harvest. These gatherings strengthened community bonds and provided a respite from daily labor. The Nile's influence extended beyond practical matters, shaping Egyptian culture and worldview. The predictable annual flood became a symbol of order and renewal, reinforcing the concept of ma'at, or cosmic balance, which was central to Egyptian philosophy and governance. This connection to the river was reflected in Egyptian art and literature. Papyrus plants were stylized into elegant column designs in architecture, while river scenes were common motifs in tomb paintings. The Nile featured prominently in myths and legends, often personified as a deity or used as a metaphor for life's journey. The river's significance even influenced the Egyptian concept of the afterlife. The Book of the Dead describes a celestial Nile that the deceased would navigate in the afterworld, mirroring their earthly existence. As centuries passed, Egyptians developed increasingly sophisticated methods to harness the Nile's power. They created nilometers, structures used to measure the height of the annual flood, which helped predict crop yields and set tax rates. This demonstrates how deeply intertwined the river was with every aspect of Egyptian society, from agriculture to governance. The Nile's gifts came with challenges, however. In years of low flooding, crops could fail, leading to famine. Conversely, excessive flooding could destroy fields and homes. Egyptians had to adapt to these fluctuations, developing strategies to store surplus grain and maintain irrigation systems. Despite these challenges, life along the Nile was generally stable and prosperous compared to many other ancient civilizations. The river's reliable annual flood and the fertile soil it left behind allowed Egyptian civilization to flourish for millennia, supporting a large population and enabling the creation of monumental works of architecture and art that continue to amaze us to this day. As we drift along the timeless currents of the Nile in our imagination, we can almost hear the distant echoes of ancient Egyptian life, the splash of oars, the calls of market vendors, the chants of priests in riverside temples. The Nile, ever-flowing and ever-changing, remains a constant thread connecting the Egypt of today with its ancient past, a living testament to one of the world's most enduring civilizations. As we continue our journey through ancient Egyptian history, let's turn our attention to the furniture that adorned the homes and palaces of this fascinating civilization. Ancient Egyptian furniture was not only functional, but also a reflection of their artistic prowess and societal values. The climate of Egypt played a significant role in shaping their furniture designs. With scorching temperatures and minimal rainfall, the ancient Egyptians favored furniture that was light, portable, and suitable for both indoor and outdoor use. This adaptability was crucial in a society where people often moved their belongings to escape the annual Nile floods. One of the most iconic pieces of ancient Egyptian furniture was the bed. Unlike our modern beds, Egyptian beds were often simple wooden frames with a woven mat of reed or palm fiber serving as the mattress. The headrest, rather than a pillow, was a distinctive feature. These were typically made of wood, stone, or even ivory for the wealthy, and shaped to support the head and neck while keeping the elaborate hairstyles of the time intact. Chairs were another important element of Egyptian furniture. The most basic form was a simple stool, often with 3 or 4 legs. These were common in households of all social classes. More elaborate chairs, reserved for the elite, featured backs and armrests, often decorated with intricate carvings and inlays of precious materials like gold or ivory. An interesting feature of Egyptian chairs was their foldable design. Many chairs could be easily folded and transported, reflecting the Egyptians' need for mobility. These folding chairs, known as X-chairs due to their shape when folded, were particularly popular among military officers and high-ranking officials who needed to travel frequently. Tables in ancient Egypt were relatively rare and mainly used for specific purposes rather than as permanent fixtures in a room. Most Egyptians ate while seated on the floor, using small, portable tables or trays. Larger tables were typically used for religious offerings in temples or for displaying items in wealthy households. Storage was an essential aspect of Egyptian furniture. Chests and boxes of various sizes were common, used to store clothing, jewelry, and other valuables. These chests were often beautifully decorated with painted scenes or inlaid with precious materials, serving both functional and decorative purposes. One particularly interesting piece of furniture was the birthing chair. This specialized seat was used by women during childbirth, designed to provide support and comfort during labor. The existence of such furniture highlights the importance placed on maternal health in ancient Egyptian society. The materials used in Egyptian furniture construction were primarily local resources. Wood was relatively scarce in Egypt, so furniture makers had to be resourceful. They often used acacia, sycamore fig, and tamarisk, which were native to the region. For more luxurious pieces, imported woods like cedar from Lebanon or ebony from Nubia were used. To compensate for the scarcity of wood, Egyptians became adept at veneering, the practice of applying thin layers of precious wood over less expensive cords. This technique allowed them to create the appearance of solid, expensive wood furniture while conserving rare materials. The joints in Egyptian furniture were remarkably sophisticated. Craftsmen used mortise and tenon joints, dovetail joints, and even leather or linen bindings to hold pieces together. These techniques were so effective that some pieces of furniture have survived intact for thousands of years. Decoration played a crucial role in Egyptian furniture design. Painted scenes were common, often depicting religious motifs or daily life. Inlays of semi-precious stones, faience, a type of ceramic, and metals were used to create intricate patterns and designs. Gold leaf was applied to furniture for the pharaohs and other elites, creating dazzling pieces that reflected their status and wealth. One of the most famous examples of ancient Egyptian furniture is the collection found in Tutankhamun's tomb. This treasure trove includes chairs, beds, chests, and even a golden throne, providing us with a remarkable glimpse into the opulence of royal furnishings. It's worth noting that while we often associate ancient Egyptian furniture with grandeur and luxury, the reality for most Egyptians was much simpler. The average household would have contained basic stools, reed mats for sleeping, and perhaps a chest for storage. The elaborate pieces we often see in museums were reserved for the elite and for religious purposes. The ancient Egyptians also had a unique approach to what we might consider outdoor furniture. Gardens were an important feature of wealthy homes and temples, and furniture was designed to be used in these spaces. Light, portable chairs and tables could be easily moved to shaded areas, allowing people to enjoy the outdoors while escaping the intense heat. Interestingly, the concept of the dining room as we know it didn't exist in ancient Egypt. Instead, meals were often taken in courtyards or on roof terraces, with small tables or trays brought out as needed. This flexible approach to dining furniture reflects the Egyptians' adaptability to their climate and lifestyle. As we conclude our exploration of ancient Egyptian furniture, it's clear that these pieces were more than just functional objects. They were works of art, symbols of status, and reflections of a society's values and beliefs. From the simple reed mats of common households to the golden thrones of pharaohs, Egyptian furniture tells us a story of ingenuity, craftsmanship, and a deep connection to the natural world and spiritual beliefs of this remarkable civilization. As we delve deeper into the intricacies of ancient Egyptian life, we turn our attention to a subject that captivated both men and women alike: cosmetics and beauty. The ancient Egyptians were renowned for their elaborate beauty rituals and sophisticated use of cosmetics, which went far beyond mere vanity. These practices were deeply intertwined with their religious beliefs, social status, and even health concerns. Let's begin with the foundation of Egyptian beauty: skincare. The harsh desert climate of Egypt necessitated a rigorous skincare routine to protect the skin from the scorching sun and dry air. One of the most popular skincare ingredients was natron, a naturally occurring mixture of sodium compounds. This versatile substance was used not only in mummification, but also in daily beauty regimens. Yawn softly, natron was mixed with oil to create a cleansing cream that would remove dirt and excess oils from the skin. After cleansing, Egyptians would apply moisturizing oils to keep their skin supple and hydrated. Common oils included almond oil, moringa oil, and balanos oil, extracted from the seeds of the desert date. These oils were often infused with fragrant herbs and flowers, serving the dual purpose of moisturizing and perfuming the skin. Moving on to makeup, the eyes were the focal point of Egyptian cosmetics. The iconic kohl eyeliner, which we associate so closely with ancient Egyptian beauty, was more than just a cosmetic enhancement. Kohl was believed to have protective properties, shielding the eyes from the harsh glare of the sun and warding off evil spirits. Speak slowly, the process of making kohl was quite intricate. It was typically made from ground minerals such as malachite, lead sulfide, and galena. These minerals were mixed with animal fat or vegetable oils to create a paste that could be easily applied around the eyes. The application of kohl was not limited to the upper and lower lash lines as we might do today. Egyptians often extended the line outwards towards the temples. creating an almond shape that was believed to resemble the eyes of their beloved cats, which were sacred animals in Egyptian culture. In addition to its aesthetic and spiritual purposes, kohl also had practical benefits. The dark pigment around the eyes helped to reduce glare from the sun, much like modern-day athletes who apply black stripes under their eyes. Some studies have even suggested that the lead-based kohl had antibacterial properties, helping to prevent eye infections that were common in the dusty Egyptian environment. Voice softens. While kohl was the most recognizable aspect of Egyptian eye makeup, it wasn't the only one. Green eye paint made from malachite was also popular. This vibrant green pigment was associated with the god Horus and was believed to have healing properties. It was often applied to the lower lid, creating a striking contrast with the black kohl. Moving down from the eyes, we come to the cheeks and lips. Rouge for the cheeks was made from red ochre, a natural clay pigment rich in iron oxide. This was mixed with fat or oil to create a creamy consistency that could be easily applied to the cheeks. For the lips, red ochre was also used, sometimes mixed with carmine, a bright red pigment derived from crushed insects. Speak slowly. The application of these cosmetics was not a haphazard affair. The Egyptians had specialized tools for their beauty routines. Small pots and jars, often made of alabaster or other fine materials, were used to store various cosmetic preparations. Delicate spoons and applicators, crafted from wood, bone, or metal, were used to scoop out and apply the products. Mirrors, typically made of polished metal, were essential items in any Egyptian's beauty kit. It's worth noting that cosmetics were not solely the domain of women in ancient Egypt. Men, particularly those of high status, also partook in these beauty rituals. Pharaohs were often depicted wearing elaborate eye makeup and even nail polish. The use of cosmetics was seen as a sign of wealth and status, as well as a way to honor the gods. Yawn softly. Speaking of status, hair care was another crucial aspect of Egyptian beauty routines. While many depictions show Egyptians with shaved heads or wearing wigs, this was not always the case. For those who did keep their natural hair, a variety of oils and creams were used to keep it healthy and shiny. Henna was used not only as a hair dye, but also as a conditioning treatment. Wigs, however, were indeed popular, especially among the upper classes. These were often made from human hair and could be quite elaborate. They served multiple purposes. They were a status symbol. They protected the scalp from the sun, and they were more comfortable and hygienic in the hot climate than natural hair. Wigs could be styled in various ways, from simple bobs to complex arrangements with braids and beads. Speak slowly. Perfume was another integral part of Egyptian beauty rituals. The art of perfumery was highly developed in ancient Egypt, with different scents being associated with different gods and used in religious ceremonies. Popular ingredients included myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, and lotus. These fragrances were often made into cones of scented wax that would be worn on top of the head. As the wax melted in the heat, it would release its fragrance and also help to keep the wearer cool. The Egyptians' commitment to beauty extended even to their nails. Both men and women would care for their nails, keeping them neatly trimmed and sometimes stained with henna. Nail polish, made from a kind of vegetable dye, was also used, with red being a particularly popular color. Voice softens. It's important to understand that for the ancient Egyptians, these beauty practices were not merely about vanity. They were deeply intertwined with their religious beliefs and their concept of ma'at, or universal balance and harmony. Taking care of one's appearance was seen as a way of honoring the gods and maintaining the order of the universe. Moreover, many of the ingredients used in Egyptian cosmetics had medicinal properties. For example, the oils used in skincare had antibacterial and moisturizing effects, helping to protect the skin from the harsh desert environment. The leading kohl, while potentially toxic in large amounts, may have helped to protect against eye infection. Even the perfumes used had aromatherapeutic benefits, with certain scents believed to have healing properties. Yawn softly. As we draw this section to a close, it's clear that the ancient Egyptians had a sophisticated and multifaceted approach to beauty and cosmetics. Their practices were not only about enhancing physical appearance, but also about spiritual well-being, social status, and health. Many of their innovations in beauty and skincare continue to influence our practices today, from the use of natural oils and moisturizers to the enduring popularity of kohl eyeliner. The legacy of Egyptian beauty practices extends far beyond the banks of the Nile, having influenced cultures throughout the Mediterranean and beyond. As we drift off to sleep, perhaps we can imagine ourselves in the cool shade of an Egyptian palace, surrounded by the subtle fragrances of lotus and myrrh, our skin soothed with precious oils, as we contemplate the timeless nature of human beings' quest for beauty and self-expression. As we continue our journey through ancient Egypt, let's turn our attention to the fascinating world of farming techniques employed by these resourceful people along the Nile River. The agricultural practices of ancient Egypt were not only innovative for their time, but also crucial for the civilization's survival and prosperity. The Nile River was the lifeblood of ancient Egyptian agriculture. Its annual flooding, known as the inundation, deposited rich silt across the floodplains, creating fertile soil for crops. This natural phenomenon was so important that it formed the basis of the Egyptian calendar, dividing the year into 3 seasons: Akhet flooding, Peret planting, and Shemu harvesting. Ancient Egyptian farmers developed a sophisticated irrigation system to make the most of the Nile's waters. They constructed a network of canals and basins to distribute water from the river to their fields. These basins, called hods, were large, flat areas surrounded by earthen banks. During the flood season, farmers would open the banks to allow water to fill the basins, soaking the soil and depositing nutrient-rich silt. Once the floodwaters receded, farmers would close off the basins and begin planting their crops. This system allowed them to cultivate land beyond the immediate vicinity of the Nile, effectively expanding their agricultural reach. The shaduf, a simple yet effective water-lifting device, was another key innovation. It consisted of a long pole with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other, allowing farmers to raise water from the Nile or canals to irrigate their fields. The ancient Egyptians grew a variety of crops, with wheat and barley being the most important. These grains formed the basis of their diet and were used to make bread and beer. They also cultivated flax for linen production, as well as vegetables such as onions, leeks, garlic, and lentils. Fruit trees, including date palms, figs, and pomegranates, were also common in Egyptian gardens and orchards. To prepare the soil for planting, farmers used simple but effective tools. The most common was the wooden plow, often pulled by oxen. This implement helped break up the soil and create furrows for planting seeds. After plowing, farmers would use hoes to break up clods of earth and level the field. Seeds were then sown by hand, with farmers walking through the field scattering seeds from bags hung around their necks. The ancient Egyptians also developed methods to maximize their crop yields. They practiced crop rotation, alternating between different types of plants to prevent soil depletion. They also understood the importance of allowing fields to lie fallow periodically, giving the soil time to recover its nutrients. Additionally, they used natural fertilizers such as pigeon droppings and Nile silt to enrich the soil. Harvesting was a labor-intensive process carried out by hand. Wheat and barley were cut using bronze sickles, and the cut stalks were tied into sheaves. These sheaves were then transported to thrashing floors, where oxen would trample the grain to separate it from the chaff. Winnowing, the process of separating the grain from the chaff, was done by tossing the mixture into the air and letting the wind blow away the lighter chaff. The ancient Egyptians also developed effective methods for storing their harvested crops. Large granaries were built to store grain, protecting it from pests and moisture. These structures were often monitored by scribes who kept meticulous records of the amounts stored and distributed. This system of storage and record-keeping was crucial for managing food supplies during times of drought or poor harvests. Interestingly, the Egyptians also cultivated crops for purposes other than food. For example, papyrus, a type of reed that grew abundantly in the Nile Delta, was harvested and processed to create writing material. This versatile plant was also used to make boats, ropes, and sandals. The cultivation and processing of papyrus became an important industry in ancient Egypt, contributing significantly to their economy and cultural development. Animal husbandry played a crucial role in ancient Egyptian agriculture as well. Cattle, sheep, goats, and poultry were raised not only for meat and dairy products, but also for their contributions to farming. Oxen were used to pull plows and thresh grain, while sheep and goats helped clear fields of stubble after harvest. Even the waste from these animals was put to use as fertilizer for the fields. The ancient Egyptians' agricultural practices were closely tied to their religious